everybody. We're coming to you
Hi.
from the beach. Woohoo!
It's hot.
I hope you can hear my dog in the background at the beach.
Dogs love the beach.
Yes, this one has decided right now to become vocal.
No, we can't hear him really. We're just
Okay,
kidding.
good, good, good. Well, this is the perfect night to talk about literacy with adults and everything to do with this fantastic adult program that Foster and Felice are running. It's uh, just such an amazing program. And I know everybody's going to want to hear all about it. So I can't wait.
It is fun. It's fun to teach. Very motivated learners.
Yes,
And
which
whenever we
is
do talk about it, people always get excited. They're excited to find out that that's a thing that we do.
we're just waiting a couple minutes for everybody to log on. But yeah, I'm one of those people who gets so excited because just feel like what you do is so unique. And I can't wait for you to talk about it. And okay, so while we're waiting, just as people are logging on, just feel free to add a question into the chat. I'm going to do my best to get to those. And of course, a lot of people, when they registered, you put in questions already. And so we're going to try to address most of those during the conversation. And then if we have some that are very specific, we'll get to those at the end. So I'm really glad you guys are here.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
I have 7:02. So
Yeah.
I am going to start by introducing you guys. Um, well, first of all, welcome on behalf of IDA Georgia. I'm so glad you guys are here. My name is Janet Street, and I'm an IDA board member, and I love the two people I get to interview tonight because they are people I used to work with and still work with, really. And they do really amazing things. So, first is Foster Souls. She is the principal of the Schenck School in Atlanta, which is a school for the remediation of dyslexia. It's kindergarten through sixth grade. But she's also done something very unique, which is she's been the director of the Adult Dyslexia Program, which is really part of ReadSource, which is really an outreach arm of the school. And she's done that for the past 27 years, like a long time. Of course, she has a master's in education and she's a fellow with the Orton-Gillingham Academy. But I think maybe most important is that she's a proud dyslexic herself and she's very, very passionate about helping other people crack the code. So that's the amazing Foster Souls. Then we have the amazing Felice Catalano, who I was lucky enough to teach with for a long time. It's fantastic. But now, much to my dismay, she's moved to Florida. She's a learning specialist at Oxbridge Academy in West Palm Beach. And she and Foster, of course, met while we were all at the Schenck School. And she has a master's in reading curriculum and instruction, and she is a certified Orton-Gillingham Academy classroom educator. So before I start asking them so many questions, I just want to set the stage with a couple of basic things, some of which came from the questions. The first is, what is dyslexia? Okay, great question. And the answer, the short version, is that it's a learning disability characterized by difficulties in word reading and or spelling that involve accuracy, speed, or both. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a link in the chat right now that you guys can grab. This is the actual lengthy definition, which actually has just been redone by IDA National, and it includes a lot more than what I just said. But if you think difficulty with reading and spelling, you've got the gist of it. Um, the other thing I want to do is just tell you a few statistics. So, the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity estimates that 20% of the population is dyslexic. Those are studies that Sally Shaywitz did for over longitudinal studies for a long, long time. And I think that's one of the higher numbers that I've heard. But I would say I've heard anything from 10% to 20%. Um, so according to the most recent NAEP scores, which is like this national test of academic progress that the country, the United States does, only 35% of high school seniors are reading proficiently. So, in other words, we're putting a lot of people out into the workforce without really doing a good job with their reading instruction. So I think that's a really interesting statistic. Um, the U.S. Department of Justice and World Literacy Foundation consistently shows that approximately 85% of youth who enter the juvenile justice system are functionally low literate. So I could go on and on with these statistics, but the bottom line is this: there are a lot of people in the United States who are not reading at a level where they would like to be reading, and it can cause significant problems. So, with that stage set, um, maybe if you guys, either one of you or both, tell us what it looks like when an adult has dyslexia, when an adult who's seems so smart and functionally is functioning beautifully in the world, like what are some characteristics and traits that you see?
Well,
Foster, you
I
want to
can
address?
begin, and then Felice, you can take it. I think that there's such a that's such a broad category of people because a lot of people that are dyslexic figure out how to read by the time they reach adulthood. So a lot of people can remain dyslexic for the rest of their life because it is the way your brain is structured, but you might cobble together a strategy for yourself of reading that leans heavier on memorization than it does on actually understanding why anything is the way that it is, but just through exposure and the way the human brain is like a fantastic computer, it begins to make sense of the visual images it keeps seeing, even if it's not successful at connecting sounds as well as it should. So some dyslexics that I have met have been non-readers, but some dyslexics I have met surprise me with their ability to read, but they still lack confidence in reading. What would you add to that, Felice?
I'm glad that you mentioned the two ends of that spectrum where there's not one profile, just like with children, there's not one profile for an adult dyslexic. We have seen students in our class that have been highly successful professional people in different fields who figured it out, but still never felt 100% confident and wanted to learn more about all the ways that they had struggled and continue to struggle. They find fabulous workarounds, but it's still work to function in their jobs or in their lives um, with all the struggles that they still have in reading. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've had students that have lived in shame and also have struggled so significantly that the ways that they have been able to support themselves financially have been limited. Relationships have been, impacted. So I don't think there's just one, there's not one face of adult dyslexia. It kind of runs the gamut.
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, I know my own father was dyslexic and he was a medical doctor, but he never ever read for pleasure.
Mm.
And when he came to my classroom and I was like, oh, look, Dad, look at all I'm doing, this is my cool smart board and this and that. And I looked over and he's sitting at my desk crying. And he was like 70 something at that point. And that blew my mind because it had stayed with him and it was personal. Um, so go
Look, I
ahead.
would just add to that that I think our work with the dyslexics and sounds like your father's story too is so important to help people separate intelligence from ability to read because as
Right.
a culture we clump those two things together. The smart kids can read, and that is just not the case. And the dyslexic brain has a lot of strengths, as your father's story illustrates, but you just need the different structure. You need to use your brain a different way to figure out reading. And then after you do that, then you can begin, your brain begins to normalize and read the same way other brains read, but you might always need more time. And that is the secret struggle of all adult dyslexics.
Right.
It's like you're the duck, with your feet pedaling underwater and nobody can see what it is that's why it's taking you so long or why you put off long reading assignments because it's just the time it takes to do it is just daunting.
Yeah, daunting. Um, Poor spelling is another, or, just difficulty with spelling is another big hallmark. I think maybe slow reading, poor spelling, would you say those are the two biggies?
Yes.
But we live in a good time where spell check is our friend, right?
Right.
So thank goodness for that.
Only if you can get close enough to
True.
the word that you really are intending to write,
Exactly.
which can be really tricky sometimes. But we can look. You can always just say, "Oh, autocorrect. Not my
Yeah.
fault."
Yeah.
Right. Now we have a built-in excuse.
Right.
Yeah. I like that. I like a built-in excuse. So just quickly, give us the background on the Adult Dyslexic Program through
Okay.
Schenck ReadSource, like the history, like what is it, and just tell us about that
Well,
because it's
uh,
very unique.
the Schenck School has its crazy name because our founder's name was David Schenck, and so we're sticking with it no matter what. And
Mhm.
If you know, you
his
know.
now we're just a bunch of skanks.
Right.
Um, David Schenck, as he was retiring, he said, "Well, the last project that I haven't really gotten around to now that he had gotten his school off the ground and successful was working with adults because he knew that his idea was that the parents of the kids that were attending his school probably also were dyslexic because of the hereditary, the nature, y'all say that
Just
word. You know what
pick
I
another
mean.
Heritable.
word.
You can inherit it, whatever. I can't
Right.
say that word. Nature of dyslexia, that he knew that he was thinking that the parents would also need this knowledge. And it is true. In the first class that we had a parent of a student, and he was sort of like Janice's father. His mind was just blown. He was a successful businessman, but he didn't know any of that stuff. And he knew his child was learning it, but he hadn't learned it. And we've had grandfathers
I was
of
about to
people
say,
that were
yeah.
connected to Skank. So David really wanted to start it, and David was a teacher in the class for a long time. The class was held at a church so that we could do classes in the evening because we knew that public transportation would be important. And then it moved to the church that was right beside where David was in a retirement community. And so then he could just walk from his retirement community over to the church. And you just sort of didn't know when he was going to show up and start laying it on them, but they loved it. Do
And
you
he
remember any
himself,
stories about David coming over?
and
Yeah.
he himself was dyslexic. And so he was another one who was so
Right,
gifted with understanding exactly how to explain things, I think, because it's his lived experience.
right.
He was a wonderful man. So, okay, so now it's not at the church anymore. It's
No, it's online. Thanks to COVID, as we were saying earlier,
right.
COVID taught us how to do that. So now we have students that I have a student right now from New York City, so that's exciting. Felice had a student that was in
Washington
Texas,
State and
Washington State.
Texas.
Yeah, Washington State.
Yeah. I had several in
Yeah.
different places. That was tricky with the time difference, but we was
Well,
we
and I
figured it
think
out.
I think registered on this call, we have people from all over the country too, which is so, I mean, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So okay, it's what, 8 weeks? When does it meet?
It's
Well,
8 weeks. It's just one evening because of being online, it was 2 evenings a week, but when we moved online, it was 1 evening a week. And our class is just a hardcore information dump about the structure of the English language. So it is not a hand holding through the reading experience. This is how it works. Go out there and try it on your own. And so you're better off with another person that can support you in reading practice, because we do read and spell during the class, but learning to read, if that's where your journey is, if you're beginning to read, it's a very effortful process to learn to read. So it's not enough time with us online to change that trajectory, but it's enough information to change the trajectory.
But as an example, you might explain like what are all these words that end in TCH and when would you word end a word in TCH instead of just CH? I mean, you might explain that kind of pattern that exists in our language.
Right. Take it away, Felice.
Well, I know where we're going with this conversation. Um, so I would say one of the most magical things that happens in those classes is when we start talking about morphology and the
Explain
parts
what
of
that
word.
is.
Morphology is the meanings of the meaningful parts of words. So that includes prefixes, suffixes, and roots, right? So when you start unlocking this mysterious,
Unlocking is the perfect morphology word.
right, unlocking, um, but to create a schema, right? This rule for not only understanding more what words mean, but then understanding how to spell them and why to spell them that way. Once, right? So I think the other day we were talking about struct, right? Struct.
That's a root.
And that means to build. And so once you understand that, right, then it becomes it's like a puzzle that you put together. I picture it like Legos, right? You can put one piece on the front and one piece on the back and, create a different kind of car, or a different kind of word that still carries meaning. Well, for adults who have lived a life and have a more advanced vocabulary, a greater vocabulary than working with children, that becomes key. And that is just magical when we start talking about that words are put together the way they are on purpose, right? With meaning
So I
behind it.
just did one of your addition problems in our chat. Con plus struct plus ion construction. Like
Right.
that's the kind of thing that you're talking about.
Correct.
Right. And just understanding that words have meaningful parts. I mean, that's a jump that adults can make so fast, as Felice is saying, that with kids you're going slowly at their vocabulary level. And so when you're beginning with a very young child, you're in young child word land.
Right.
But when you're beginning with adults, can, as soon as you teach them short vowels, excuse me, you can teach very long words that they've heard before because they can string those syllables together.
So I think I was very lucky because in fifth grade, my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Watkins, I hope she's out there listening sometime. She was amazing. And she had us just pick up the dictionary and write down every single word that we could find that ended with TION or SION or ABLE or whatever. And that was my epiphany. It was kind of like, oh, you know, this is just math with parts of words. And I do think I agree. It's like the trifecta. It helps you read, helps you spell, and helps you understand the meaning of all those words. So, very cool.
And oftentimes there are words that an adult dyslexic or an adult struggling reader will know, but they may never have seen it really in print or been recognized it in print before.
Right.
And that's also a big aha when they look at it and say, that's that's how you spell obnoxious? I didn't know there was an X
That's
in
so
there.
obnoxious.
Right. They're like, I've never seen that word before. I know it, I use it. But to then put that picture, right, together with the word that they've known and used, and it's just really, it's amazing. It's an
Yeah.
amazing experience.
And I'm glad you said the word picture because a lot of people think of words as what the word looks like without ever having analyzed either its meaningful parts or its phonemic parts. And so that's why you can get a completely wrong word written down, but it was the image that came to
Right.
their mind because they have been relying on their visual memory instead of any kind of sound analysis because the sound analysis is the hard part for the dyslexic brain. And we give a phonemic awareness assessment now at the beginning of our class that we didn't used to give because it was a test for kids.
Right.
And you would thought, well, any adult could do this if a third grader can do it. But the dyslexic brain has a hard time pulling those sounds apart and hearing the sounds separately. And that's easy to analyze. And then it's easy to help the adult who is clearly trying, clearly focused, clearly present, and they're still struggling. They can finally feel that it's your brain, it's not you or your effort or your intelligence that's keeping you from doing this. There's some glitchy thing in there. And then the good news is, of course, you can get better at that stuff.
Yes,
And
that really does change a lot, phonemic awareness.
Yeah.
I
That's the
also don't,
sounds.
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go, go.
I just, I was triggered by something Foster said that is really important to mention, which is the other kind of um, unspoken or unidentified magic that happens when you have a group of people together who have had
Mm.
a common background, a common struggle, a common secret, maybe.
Right. Oh, totally.
Um, so the community that is created amongst the participants, amongst the students, lasts far beyond the 3 hours that we spend with them, reading together. They connect with each other. They share resources, which is,
Right.
brilliant. Um, and there's a real um, safety and a comfort in knowing that you can speak freely about what your experience has been and the ways that you've struggled and the things that you've done to accommodate um, with other people.
And you can laugh about it
Exactly.
because it's so crazy that such a small thing could be so hard. Like hearing a letter sound, like how hard can that be? But it is hard and it's hard for everybody. And so to bring down that shame wall, like Felice is saying, and then not only that, but the camaraderie of being able to laugh and say, can you believe it?
Right. And they like they'll create this group text and share words with each other.
Right.
Like, did you know that that's how you spell it?
But that really is the coolest thing is that once you start cracking the code like that, you start to become like sort of a scientist with these words.
Right.
And you get really
You're
turned
exactly
on
right.
to learning more and more of them. I just put the link, by the way, to the Adult Dyslexia Program at Schenck ReadSource, just because I think it's a good thing too. Somebody on the call may be interested or may want to refer somebody. But yeah, each session meets for what, 8 weeks?
Yes.
Tuesdays like 6 to 9 at night. And there's a small fee, but it's very, very small. Um, and and okay, so is there like a curriculum that you use, or is this just what you've come up with yourselves?
Well, you mentioned Orton-Gillingham, so we're using the Orton-Gillingham approach, which means that we're beginning by focusing on letter sounds, because I think somebody might have asked in one of their questions about worrying about offending someone by going back to letter sounds. But You just can't worry about that. You have to, if you're working with an adult, you have to go back and talk about short vowel sounds just like you would with a kid that you got as a tutoring student. You don't want to assume anything because that's been the whole problem. They have a shaky foundation or lack thereof. And so if you don't make sure to bolster the foundation, then you don't have anything to build the morphology on top
Right,
of. So you
right.
really do have to go back to the beginning. So our scope and sequence exactly is exactly that. You start with letter sounds. You talk about types of syllables. You move right into morphology as that makes sense in the, and then like you would with any Orton-Gillingham lesson, you're going spelling, reading, spelling, reading, spelling, reading. And sometimes they think, I thought this was going to be a reading class. All we're doing is spelling. But I always say spelling is weightlifting for reading.
Right.
Oh, I love that. I always say it's two sides of the same coin, but
Well,
but
it's more like wind sprints, because if you can spell, you can really read.
yeah, that's a really well said. Okay.
I would say,
Uh,
though, Foster, just to mention, the 8-week class is kind of the beginning, right?
Right.
And then we've got students that come back again and again and again and again. And we have um, kind of modified the instruction based on how many times they've been back, right? So if you've got a group that understands the language of reading
Right.
and you can talk to them about it, they've got that part, right? Then um, we can, then it becomes something a little more advanced and a little more real life focused,
Right.
where they're applying everything
and
that
that's
we've
why
taught
it's
them.
nice that there are two of you because you kind of split up the groups, right?
We have done that.
Yes, and that is true. I mean, that goes back to the camaraderie of it too, and sort of the thirst for understanding that hearing it once, sort of drinking from the fire hose the first time, it doesn't feel like enough. But
Mhm.
then they come back and then somebody else is new and you
Right.
kind of weave them into the flow. But that's also the reason that we do the screening because we want to have groups like Felice is explaining that groups that could work together well and support each other and be be right around the same pace.
Well, so speaking of the screening, so somebody applies for to participate in the class and you work with them online just to kind of see where they are skill wise, right?
Mhm.
Is that what you
Right.
mean by screening? Okay, gotcha. Um, okay, very cool. So one of the things you told me is that, and you do this as you're doing this screening, is you're not everybody needs this program. So tell me about that.
Right. Not everybody needs this program, but there are a lot of adults out there that lack the confidence or the enough knowledge to be good self-advocates. And so when I meet an adult whose reading is intact and their spelling is, passable for the 21st century, um, but they're still feeling shaky and it sort of becomes a question of just owning the fact that that once again, as I said before, you have to separate it from intelligence. This is not It's not lack of intelligence that makes reading hard, and that whole understanding of dyslexia is just the brain formation. You found your path around it. Your brain is huge and can make all kinds of connections, and then learning to advocate for yourself and sort of accept yourself for the brain that you have and that means the time that you'll need because dyslexia robs you of time no matter what age you are and you just have to uh, live in that world because that's the reality of dyslexia for a
So
child or for an adult.
I remember the first time I heard this term advocacy. I didn't really get what that meant. So one of the things you see a lot is people who are in a job and maybe their bosses said to them, "Hey, I want you to take this test. I want you to become a manager or whatever, but fill out this form, take this test, whatever it is. There's some hoop that they have to jump through. Maybe it's even just to get the job.
Right.
And so that's where they get kind of blocked and whatever, unable to make that leap. And so, what would advocacy look like for that person?
Well, advocacy looks like speaking up for yourself and being able to say what's hard for you, but don't leave it at what's hard for you. Then you flip to what you need to for that to be possible, because you probably know what would work for you to be successful. If it is having to write, then being able to dictate, just simple things that you're probably using in your daily life, but it's sort of the willingness to say, I am dyslexic. I need this modification to my workplace so that I can be successful because I have a lot to add to your organization. Because if you think about it, they wanted you to go up the ladder. They didn't know it's a hidden disability. So
Yes.
because it's hidden, you have to advocate for yourself, and you'll be surprised at the people understand. They just don't know until you are honest with them. And I think it's been interesting to be have done this for so long because people's understanding of it has changed so much, and it's better understood. It's a more common term to say out loud for the first time, and we have wonderful technology that really does level the playing field. Because
Yes.
if
So
you
I was
think
just going to
when
say the technology it can be a great thing because, like you mentioned, the speech to text
right.
and text to speech, that, we can dictate, we can do all this and spell check and all this and AI, my goodness. But it can also be like email. Email is a technology that makes work harder. Used to be you could be on the phone, right? And
Mm.
now a lot of times you're responding. So I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting arc. Sorry, I'm talking so much, but having done this for so long, I would say there were the people that were on the phone and highly successful, and then they had to go to email. But at that time, email didn't have the voice features that it has now. So then email sent them to the class because they were having to write and read email. You're
Right.
exactly right. But now email has got such good support that I do think it's easier
I
to.
would also just like to add to all, I mean, that's just, we talked about this at length, so this is a big topic now, but just to add on to what you said before about what advocacy looks like, um, of course, what it means is to speak up and to let the people that need to know what you need to do your job well and to be successful and to contribute in a full and meaningful way. What also happens inevitably is as soon as one person raises their hand and says, I'm dyslexic, I need more time, what happens?
Everybody
Uh,
else says, "Hey, me
Suddenly,
too."
right. And it's that relief, right? It's that
Yeah.
relief. And there again is your community. There again is your support system because it's not just you. It's never just you. We know
No.
that. We know what the numbers are.
Right.
So there's so the benefit, the importance of speaking up and being comfortable in naming it, right?
Mm.
Even if it's not a diagnosis, right? Maybe um, just again, like our classes are not just for people with diagnoses. Sometimes they're just people that have struggled for a really long time and clearly had they ever been diagnosed as kids, they likely would have been diagnosed with dyslexia. But
Mm.
you don't have to name it to do what's necessary to kind of live well, right? And be
I'm
successful.
I'm really glad you said the word diagnosis because several people, when they sent in questions when they registered, asked about how would you get diagnosed as an adult? with dyslexia. And I'm going to put in I'm going to put in our chat a couple of things, but talk about that if you would.
Well, you started, I think, with, did we talk about the link to the Georgia State program yet?
I'm putting it in now, but talk about
Okay.
what that is.
Foster, can you talk more about
Okay, I
that?
can talk about that. Any a psychologist is who does a diagnosis for dyslexia. A psychologist would do a battery of tests that were both IQ assessment and achievement assessment, and that's the way you have that psychoeducational evaluation done and that diagnosis dyslexia. They're mostly looking at the way your sound system has developed and how your brain processes information. So many psychologists, so don't think that a psychologist can't do it just because you're an adult. Unfortunately, because it takes so long to administer the test is pretty expensive. Well, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So there are places where you can get a less expensive test, usually a university system. If you're not here in Atlanta, a university system is a good place to look for a place where they're training people to give those tests and you can get less expensive tests. Here in Atlanta, Georgia State has a testing center, and Janet put the number in there. So it's students learning to give that, but of course, supervised by uh, PhD people so that it's a good thing, and their pricing is on a sliding scale. University of Georgia has a testing center too. So I think that universities are a good place to look. There's also through the state, there's the vocational rehabilitation that can point you towards testing. So the state of Georgia has vocational, some people call it voc rehab. You might have heard that term. Uh, they can help you with testing. And there is a wonderful place at Georgia Tech here in Atlanta that's called Tools for Life, which is not a testing place, but it is a way, it's a way to connect you with assistive technology and things like that. So all of those things are helpful resources. And it's comforting, and that is the kind of diagnosis you need for a high stakes situation. But I think I like what Felice was saying is you don't have to have a very expensive test for the day-to-day life of if you want to work on your reading. It's clear to anyone who knows how to teach reading when that phonics, that phonetic system is not intact. And that's what can improve your reading if you hook up with somebody who can teach you more about the phonics structure of English and the morphological structure of English. And then you practice, practice, practice. I do meet a lot of people that want me to just be able to make them a reader like a light switch, and it's not a light switch. It's a something that you have to practice. It's like an exercise routine. You have to put yourself on because a lot of adults have very, very busy lives, and you have to think of it as an exercise routine, and you wouldn't go out and run a marathon at the beginning. You would start small, you would increase your stamina for reading, and the the more you read, the better you read. Read to your kids, read out loud, read to yourself, read, 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 read. The more you read, the better you read. That's the bottom line.
What do you think about putting the closed captions on a television? It seems like that would be helpful because sometimes you see a word that you've heard a lot and then you see it written, and
Right.
is that like a good strategy? I don't know. I just thought of that off the top of my head. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Somebody do some
Oh no,
Absolutely.
research on that.
there's research studies.
That supports that.
There is research
I
that
did not
supports
know
that.
that.
Yeah,
Oh, very cool.
yeah.
Okay, good to know. All right, so hopefully everybody's getting the things that we're posting. Thank you for somebody telling me I was not posting it to everyone like a knucklehead, but we fixed that. There's some really interesting questions that came in. One person said, "What success rate do you find with adults who've had very limited success in school?" And maybe part of that answer is it depends, but probably depends a lot on kind of it's kind of like working out, like the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. Is that fair?
I would say, I mean, when I was listening to Foster speak and then hearing that question right after, um, as we know, even if we can't, even if our tongues have trouble with the word hereditary, it does run
Thank
in
you.
families, right? So look, I had to sit here and think about it for 20 minutes before I was brave enough to say it. But the fact that that is true, um, it does run in families. And so when you say read to your children or read to a lot of our students have been parents and grandparents of children with dyslexia that have been diagnosed,
Mhm.
and they then it becomes a kind of a family project, but a fun one where everybody's learning at the same time, right?
That's true. Yeah,
And
that's true.
that's been another kind of beautiful side effect of um, finding out later in life what you didn't know when you were younger, seeing the children and the grandchildren in your family um, struggling the way that you did at one time, but getting the help that they need now. And so that has also been part of the motivation and inspiration for some of our students to seek help because a child in their family had been diagnosed and they realized, oh, that was me too. I
Mm.
want to do something about it now, right? So when we say read together, you're reading together with other people in your family that also are benefiting.
Right,
Right,
right.
right.
So
Um, Go
I could
ahead.
speak a little bit about what success looks like. Of course, it's different for everybody, uh, but I think of it as feeling secure with a toolkit as opposed to just being a whatever level reader that you are, what you're trying to achieve as a level or however we think about reading. What I want people to have is a way of understanding and a way of figuring out so you don't have that hopeless feeling like, well, there it is, but I have no idea what it is. And since it's not popping into my head, there's nothing else I can do. You just want to have something that you can do. So I think the way that Orton-Gillingham works, it gives you the tools to approach a word that you don't know. And then the more you read, the more you learn to use the words to help you understand what the word is if it's not a word in your vocabulary. So there's a lot to reading. It's a very, very complicated skill because reading is like thinking, right? Thinking can be very complicated too. But as long as you have the tools to figure out words, that's what you need. So you don't feel like you're hitting a wall.
Yeah, I love that. Um, Another person asked about grant money and is there grant money available? Like, for instance, if an employer wanted to sponsor a program, and I'm going to put into the chat real quick that yes, IDA Georgia does have grant money. It's called the HARC grant, which stands for Helping All Reading Communities. And that this is the perfect time of year actually because um, the application I believe is due September 1st. You go on the website and look at the exact date. Don't quote me there, but I should know since that's my committee. But there is money available. That's the good news. All right, let me just find another couple of questions. Several people have said like I'm tutoring a child I'm starting to work with kids who are older or like kind of where do I start?
Mm.
And
Well,
maybe you would say start at the beginning and go
right.
as fast as you can and as slow as you must.
You must, right?
I mean, right? Start with the letter sounds even, right? And some of
Yep.
those simpler patterns and then eventually move into to more
Right.
advanced.
Because adults are interested in things that kids would like glaze over in a New York Minute about. Because if you say to an adult why T and D sounds are
Right.
close and confusing, they'll be like, "Really? That's amazing." And
Let's
you
talk
say
about
the
that.
same thing to a kid, they're like,
Who cares?
so,
Yeah, they're probably
the
thinking all the sounds are confusing. What's the big
Right.
deal?
So the intricacies of the complexity is just more neurons firing to make more connections, because the more you know, the more interesting it is, the more it's explained and connecting, the better you're going to remember it. So you can get those kind of fun details. And just talking about letter sounds, like you can make that you never told me that before kind of
Right,
information, and not just make it seem juvenile.
One of the things I do is train teachers to teach reading, and I use a lot of video with that. And invariably, I'll be watching a teacher's video as the teacher is teaching a student something, and my husband will walk behind me and he'll say, "There's a rule for that? I didn't know that. That's why it says Babel and not Babel, you know?" And it's just so sad that so many of us were not taught these patterns that can really unlock this mysterious thing called the English language, you know?
right.
I totally agree. The rules are very helpful. The rules are comforting, and that's what they didn't know, and that is like a secret that was kept from them. I mean, but 75% of the population doesn't even have to think that through. It just clicks in some
Yeah,
mysterious ways. And so that's another annoying thing about being dyslexic, is that you can't figure out how they're figuring it out. You're trying just as hard as they're trying, and you're that is just not clicking for you. It's just not happening. And so it's not surprising that you would have self-esteem issues, right? Because your whole life, people have been doing something seemingly by magic that you've been trying to do.
I I
So,
I love this comment from one of our the folks on the call, that it's fascinating now that she's on this learning journey because it wasn't anything that she learned in her master's teacher prep. That is such a good point.
mm,
Thank you for making that, Sherry Lucas. That the vast majority of teachers, this is going to blow your mind, are not taught how to teach reading, really how to teach reading according to research methods that are tried and true and proven. And that sounds ridiculous. Like you would never graduate from medical school without knowing how to do an appendectomy, right? But unfortunately, it is a reality. It's changing. The good news is it's changing. And so, as much as we might be angry with teachers who maybe didn't teach us how all these things, the fact is they weren't taught these things either. So it's kind of this vicious cycle, right? Is that fair?
Well,
but
I
it
think about our teacher training programs that we've all been through and being in a room of people, of other teachers who are hearing some of this for the first time and have that exact same reaction. Say, no one ever taught me to read this
Right.
way. I didn't know to teach reading this way.
I always start on day one and I tell the teachers, you're going to be a little bit angry.
Right,
Because, like, I've been teaching kids to read for years. Why didn't anybody tell me this?
right.
And it is sort of maddening. I mean, and I don't want to sound like negative Nelly because the truth is the word really is getting out. And we've had some amazing governors in Georgia, more than one. And the legislation is coming, and all that's happening all over the country. That there are mandatory screenings now, 3 times a year for the first K through 3 in Georgia. So it's really starting to happen, which is awesome.
There's a movement.
absolutely, teachers are learning lots. The Cox Center from the speech school, they have great training that's available
I am
online.
so
And
glad that you mentioned that. Thank you. Cox Campus, maybe one of our panelists can put up a link to that. They have free training for all teachers, free, online, available. It's fantastic. So, yes, a lot of people are saying, yay. Okay, I have 749. I'm just looking screeners for adults. What do you use to screen? Are they just materials you've made yourself, or do you use something more formal like a C-top or something?
Wilson, if you want a screener for adults, Wilson has a screener for adults. Though I don't use it just because we screen so many students at Skank, I just ended up using something similar to what we use. We use a phonemic awareness assessment, as I mentioned earlier, and I think that's the most important thing. I always save it till the end so I kind of know what kind of person I'm dealing with. And I usually get them to just read the Gates paragraphs, which are
Hmm.
one continuous story that starts off easy, so easy entry into it, and I tell them in advance it's going to get more complex sentences as it goes along. You can kind of see visually it gets harder, and just let them go until clearly they need to stop. And they practically all miss the same word on the back of the first paragraph. So it's pretty well done, and it's a good build up. So that we start with that, then we move to just single word reading. And I always explain that reading connected text is like going into that. You're paying attention to the story and it's supporting you, but then reading a list of words. Some people like that better because it's like you can just concentrate. Some people hate it because there's no context. So two different kinds of things. And then we read nonsense words, and that's usually when the bottom falls out because they've never done anything like that before. And didn't even know that that was possible. So with a good reader, even though they think they can't do it, they begin to see, oh yeah, that could be like that. And they make those connections. And that might be their first little foray into thinking about the sounds instead of just expecting the instant recognition of reading. And then we do a little spelling. It kind of goes the same way. Uh, some increasingly difficult real words, and then some nonsense words, and then some phrases. You mentioned the word match, and we never really came back to that as a
All right.
spelling rule. Then we do some rule-based words because I like to use the screening as a explanation of what the class is going to be like. So the nonsense words really let you know, oh, she's going to really make me look at the interior of words
Ooh,
and the phonemic awareness, even though that's at the end. Uh, but then the phrases with the rules in it, then to be able to say what you were saying about the comfort of rules, like there's a rule for that, there's a rule for that, there's a rule for that, rule. So six things that have rules that they maybe know, maybe some, maybe something they don't know. So
Mhm.
it kind of explains what we're going to do in the class and whether they need the class or not. So that's the screening I use. But the test that the Wilson has is called WADE. I just remember that I'm not quite sure what it stands for. Wilson Adult Dyslexic
Yeah, I
Evaluation.
know what you're talking about. I think I have a
It's a
copy of that,
booklet.
but
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for putting in the Cox Campus link. So that's a great one. I just want to circle back really quick. Someone made the comment that they are in an education program right now, and that they don't always get essentially the accommodations that they're supposed to get from their teachers. And I think that's not unique to you. That happens all the time that, maybe you've actually been diagnosed and you're supposed to get certain accommodations like more time, for instance, usually. And then some teachers honor that and some teachers don't. It's very frustrating. And there is a law, there is a federal law that backs you up on this, just so you know. Yeah, do you guys want to talk about that?
The Americans with Disabilities Act is what you can print that off easily, and it just says reasonable accommodations in the workplace, and school is a workplace.
Mhm.
I would though also say study buddies and your student center, your support center at universities are great to help you advocate for what you need within the university. Also, somebody asked about high school, and y'all, let's face it, high school is the worst. One of the questions was about motivating a student with dyslexia through high school. The demands of high school are so intense, and so nobody, you have five teachers or eight teachers, they don't know what the other person's expecting you to be doing. So the time demand is just overwhelming. So for the kid in high school that somebody asked about, you just have to keep advocating for time and just say, don't worry, college is not going to be this way because you're going to be able to focus on what you want to do to set the speed for yourself. But you just have to slog it through high school.
Yeah, that is so well said.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know. It stinks, right? Um, oh shoot, there was one other thing I was going to ask you about.
But that is also an ideal time to build those advocacy skills
Right.
and
Right.
realize that when you create relationships with teachers and counselors and tutors and anyone that you can get to be on your side, which there's plenty of those people around. You just need to find them.
Right. And there are a
And
lot of people in high school that you
right.
need to
And just find,
advocate with.
so it's really just about speaking up um, in a confident, respectful way that also opens doors for other people who are not as brave yet, right, to do the same. And then
That's well
suddenly
said.
you're not alone. You have someone has to be first.
Right.
And
So I
sometimes,
used to
yeah,
I used to always tell our students, Felice and I taught sixth grade together, and I would say to them, this is what you say to your next teacher. I really want to succeed in your class, and I'm going to work so hard. You start with that because there's not a teacher anywhere who isn't going to love that, right? And then you
Right.
say, and here's what I need to succeed in your class.
it's great. It's great when the student comes to you already knowing,
Yeah.
Yes,
and not just depending upon the teacher to know what the accommodations should look like. I
right.
mean, they should, yes, they should, but
Right.
Similarly in the workplace, the very first teacher I taught with at the Schenck School said to me, "Hey, are you dyslexic?" I said, no, I don't think so." She said, "Good, because I am. And every letter that we send home to parents, you're going to have to proof
you
it."
have
I
to
said,
proofread.
"Okay."
Hmm.
But she was just so straightforward about it, like, "Hey, no big deal. This is what I need you to do. Moving on, you know." And I thought, good for you. Good for
Yeah.
you. I loved it. Um, any parting thoughts, ladies, before we I hate hanging up because I could talk about this all night long. I think what you guys are doing is amazing. I love it so much. I'm so glad to have had this opportunity to talk to you about it because we need like 55 more of you.
Well,
Absolutely. Well, it's
it's
been
been,
fun, and IGA Georgia does a great job too.
We
yeah,
love
thanks for
IDA.
letting us, thank you for asking all these wonderful questions and bringing people in to have the conversation. It has been the joy of my professional life to work with both of you amazing humans, and I'm just very happy and blessed to be part of this. So thank you.
Well, I'd say that's a pretty good note to end on.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thanks everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
Thank
night.
you.